Chapter 5, May 16th. I really have not written in my diary for quite a long time, because Mr. Eisman arrived in Paris, and when Mr. Eisman is in Paris, we really do not seem to do practically anything else but the same thing. I mean, we go shopping, and we go to a show, and we go to Montmartre, and when a girl is always going with Mr. Eisman, nothing practically happens. And I did not even bother to learn any more French, because I always seem to think it is better to leave French to those that cannot do anything else but talk French. So finally, Mr. Eisman seemed to lose quite a lot of interest in all of my shopping, so he heard about a button factory that was for sale quite cheaply in Vienna, and as Mr. Eisman is in the button profession, he thought it would be quite a good thing to have a button factory in Vienna. So he went to Vienna, and he said he did not care if he did not ever see the Rue de la Paix again. So he said if he thought Vienna would be good for a girl's brains, he would send for Dorothy and I, and we could meet him at Vienna and learn something. Because Mr. Eisman really wants me to get educated more than anything else, especially shopping. So now we have a telegram, and Mr. Eisman says in the telegram for Dorothy and I to take an Oriental Express, because we really ought to see the Central of Europe, because we American girls have quite a lot to learn in the Central of Europe. So Dorothy says if Mr. Eisman wants us to see the Central of Europe, she bets there is not a Rue de la Paix in the whole Central of Europe. So Dorothy and I are going to take an Oriental Express tomorrow. And I really think it is quite unusual for two American girls like I and Dorothy to take an Oriental Express all alone, because it seems that in the Central of Europe, they talk some other kinds of languages which we do not understand besides French. But I always think that there is nearly always some gentleman who will protect two American girls like I and Dorothy, who are all alone and who are traveling in the Central of Europe to get educated. May 17th. So now we are on an Oriental Express, and everything seems to be quite unusual. I mean, Dorothy and I got up this morning, and we looked out of the window of our compartment, and it was really quite unusual. Because it was farms, and we saw quite a lot of girls who seemed to be putting small-size haystacks onto large-size haystacks while their husbands seemed to sit at a table under quite a shady tree and drink beer, or else their husbands seemed to sit on a fence and smoke their pipe and watch them. So Dorothy and I looked at two girls who seemed to be plowing up all of the ground with only the aid of a cow, and Dorothy said, I think we girls have gone one step too far away from New York, because it begins to look to me as if the Central of Europe is no country for we girls. So we both became quite worried. I became quite depressed, because if this is what Mr. Eisman thinks we American girls ought to learn, I really think it is quite depressing. So I do not think we care to meet any gentlemen who have been born and raised in the Central of Europe. The more I travel, and the more I seem to see other gentlemen, the more I seem to think of American gentlemen. So now I am going to get dressed and go to the dining car and look for some American gentleman and hold a conversation, because I really feel so depressed. Dorothy keeps trying to depress me, because she keeps saying that I will probably end up in a farm in the Central of Europe doing a sister act with a plow. Because Dorothy's jokes are really very unrefined, and I think that I will feel much better if I go to the dining car and have some luncheon. Well, I went to the dining car, and I met a gentleman who was quite a delightful American gentleman. It was quite a coincidence, because we girls have always heard about Henry Spofford, and it was really nobody else but the famous Henry Spofford, who is the famous Spofford family, who is a very, very fine old family, who is very, very wealthy. Mr. Spofford is one of the most famous families in New York, and he is not like most gentlemen who are wealthy, but he works all of the time for the good of others. He is the gentleman who always gets his picture in all of the newspapers because he is always censuring all of the plays that are not good for people's morals. And all of we girls remember the time when he was in the Ritz for luncheon, and he met a gentleman friend of his, and the gentleman friend had Peggy Hopkins Joyce to luncheon, and he introduced Peggy Hopkins Joyce to Mr. Spofford, and Mr. Spofford turned on his heels and walked away. Because Mr. Spofford is a very, very famous Presbyterian, and he is really much too Presbyterian to meet Peggy Hopkins Joyce. It is unusual to see a gentleman who is such a young gentleman as Mr. Spofford be so Presbyterian, because when most gentlemen are 35 years of age, their minds nearly always seem to be on something else. So when I saw no one else but the famous Mr. Spofford, I really became quite thrilled, because all of we girls have tried very hard to have an introduction to Henry Spofford, and it was quite unusual to be shut up on a train in the central of Europe with him. So I thought it would be quite unusual for a girl like I to have a friendship with a gentleman like Mr. Spofford, who really does not even look at a girl unless she at least looks like a Presbyterian. And our family in Little Rock were really not so Presbyterian. So I thought I would sit at his table. So then I had to ask him about all of the money, because all of the money they use in the central of Europe has not even got so much sense to it as the kind of francs they use in Paris, because it seems to be called kronens, and it seems to take quite a lot of them, because it takes 50,000 of them to even buy a small-size package of cigarettes. And Dorothy says if the cigarettes had tobacco in them, we couldn't lift enough kronens over a counter to pay for a package. So this morning, Dorothy and I asked the porter to bring us a bottle of champagne, and we really did not know what to give him for a tip. So Dorothy said for me to take one of the things called a 1,000,000 kronens, and she would take one of them called a 1,000,000 kronens, and I would give him mine first, and if he gave me quite a dirty look, she would give him hers. So after we paid for the bottle of champagne, I gave him my 1,000,000 kronens, and before we could do anything else, he started in to grabbing my hand and kissing my hand and getting down on his knees. So we finally had to push him right out of the compartment. So 1,000,000 kronens seemed to be enough. So I told Mr. Spofford how we did not know what to give the porter when he brought us our bottle of mineral water, so that I asked him to tell me all about all of the money, because I told him I always seemed to think that a penny earned was a penny saved. So it really was quite unusual, because Mr. Spofford said that that was his favorite motto. So then we got to talking quite a lot, and I told him that I was traveling to get educated, and I told him I had a girl with me who I was trying to reform, because I thought if she would put her mind more on getting educated, she would get more reformed. Because after all, Mr. Spofford will have to meet Dorothy sooner or later, and he might wonder what a refined girl like I was doing with a girl like Dorothy. So Mr. Spofford really became quite intrigued, because Mr. Spofford loves to reform people, and he loves to censure everything, and he really came over to Europe to look at all the things that Americans come over to Europe to look at, when they really should not look at them, but they should look at all of the museums instead. Because if that is all we Americans come to Europe to look at, we should stay home and look at America first. So Mr. Spofford spends all of his time looking at things that spoil people's morals. So Mr. Spofford really must have very, very strong morals, or else all the things that spoil other people's morals would spoil his morals. But they do not seem to spoil Mr. Spofford's morals, and I really think it is wonderful to have such strong morals. So I told Mr. Spofford that I thought that civilization is not what it ought to be, and we really ought to have something else to take its place. So Mr. Spofford said that he would come to call on Dorothy and I in our compartment this afternoon, and we would talk it all over, if his mother does not seem to need him in her compartment, because Mr. Spofford's mother always travels with Mr. Spofford, and he never does anything unless he tells his mother all about it and asks his mother if he ought to. So he told me that that is the reason he has never got married, because his mother does not think that all of the flappers we seem to have nowadays are what a young man ought to marry when a young man is full of so many morals as Mr. Spofford seems to be full of. So I told Mr. Spofford that I really felt just like his mother feels about all of the flappers, because I am an old-fashioned girl. So then I got to worrying about Dorothy quite a lot, because Dorothy is really not so old-fashioned, and she might say something in front of Mr. Spofford that might make Mr. Spofford wonder what such an old-fashioned girl as I was doing with such a girl as Dorothy. So I told him how I was having quite a hard time reforming Dorothy, and I would like to have him meet Dorothy, so he could tell me if he really thinks I am wasting quite a lot of time trying to reform a girl like Dorothy. So then he had to go to his mother. So I really hope that Dorothy will act more reformed than she usually acts in front of Mr. Spofford. Well, Mr. Spofford just left our compartment, so he really came to pay a call on us after all. So Mr. Spofford told us all about his mother, and I was really very, very intrigued, because if Mr. Spofford and I become friendly, he is the kind of gentleman that always wants a girl to meet his mother. I mean, if a girl gets to know what kind of a mother a gentleman's mother is like, she really knows more what kind of a conversation to use on a gentleman's mother when she meets her. Because a girl like I is really always on the verge of meeting gentlemen's mothers. But such an unrefined girl as Dorothy is really not the kind of girl that ever meets gentlemen's mothers. So Mr. Spofford says his mother has to have him take care of her quite a lot, because Mr. Spofford's mother's brains have never really been so strong, because it seems his mother came from such a very fine old family that even when she was quite a small-sized child, she had to be sent to a school that was a special school for people of very fine old families who had to have things very easy on their brain. So she still has to have things very easy on her brain, so she has a girl who is called her companion, who goes with her everywhere, who is called Miss Chapman. Because Mr. Spofford says that there is always something new going on in the world, which they did not get a chance to tell her about at the school. So now Miss Chapman keeps telling her instead. Because how would she know what to think about such a new thing as a radio, for instance, if she did not have a Miss Chapman to tell her what it was, for instance? So Dorothy spoke up, and Dorothy said, "What a responsibility that girl has got on her shoulders. For instance, what if Miss Chapman told her a radio was something to build a fire in, and she would get cold some day and stuff it full of papers and light it?" But Mr. Spofford told Dorothy that Miss Chapman would never make such a mistake, because he said that Miss Chapman came from a very, very fine old family herself, and she had a very fine brain. So Dorothy said, "If she really has got such a fine brain, I bet her fine old family once had an iceman who could not be trusted." So Mr. Spofford and I did not pay any more attention to Dorothy, because Dorothy really does not know how to hold a conversation. So then I and Mr. Spofford held a conversation all about morals, and Mr. Spofford says he really thinks the future of everything is between the hands of Mr. Blank, the district attorney, who is now the famous district attorney who is closing up all the places in New York where they sell all of the liquor. So Mr. Spofford said that a few months ago, when Mr. Blank decided he would try to get the job to be the district attorney, he put $1,000 worth of liquor down his sink. So now Mr. Blank says that everybody else has got to put it down their sink. So Dorothy spoke up, and Dorothy said, "If he poured $1,000 worth down his sink to get himself $1 million worth of publicity and a good job, when we pour it down our sink, what do we get?" But Mr. Spofford is too brainy a gentleman to answer any such a foolish question. So he gave Dorothy a look that was full of dignity, and he said he would have to go back to his mother. So I was really quite angry at Dorothy. So I followed Mr. Spofford down the hall of the railway train, and I asked Mr. Spofford if he thought I was wasting quite a lot of time reforming a girl like Dorothy. So Mr. Spofford thinks I am, because he really thinks a girl like Dorothy will never have any reference. So I told Mr. Spofford I had wasted so much time on Dorothy, it would really break my heart to be a failure. So then I had tears in my eyes. So Mr. Spofford is really very, very sympathetic, because when he saw that I did not have any handkerchief, he took his own handkerchief and he dried up all of my tears. So then he said he would help me with Dorothy quite a lot and get her mind to running on things that are more educational. So then he said he thought that we ought to get off the train at a place called Munich, because it was very full of art, which they call Kunst in Munich, which is very, very educational. So he said he and Dorothy and I would get off of the train in Munich, because he could send his mother right on to Vienna with Miss Chapman, because every place always seems to look alike to his mother anyway. So we are all going to get off the train at Munich, and I can send Mr. Eisman a telegram when nobody is looking, because I really do not think I will tell Mr. Spofford about Mr. Eisman, because after all, their religions are different, and when two gentlemen have such different religions, they do not seem to have so much to get congenial about. So I can telegraph Mr. Eisman that Dorothy and I thought we would get off the train at Munich to look at all of the art. So that I went back to Dorothy, and I told Dorothy if she did not have anything to say in the future, to not say it. Because even if Mr. Spofford is a fine old family, and even if he is very Presbyterian, I and he could really be friendly after all, and talk together quite a lot. I mean, Mr. Spofford likes to talk about himself quite a lot. So I said to Dorothy, it really shows that, after all, he is just like any other gentleman. But Dorothy said she would demand more proof than that. So Dorothy says she thinks that maybe I might become quite friendly with Mr. Spofford, and especially with his mother, because she thinks his mother and I have quite a lot in common. But she says, if I ever bump into Miss Chapman, she thinks I will come to a croaker, because Dorothy saw Miss Chapman when she was at a luncheon, and Dorothy says Miss Chapman is the kind of a girl that wears a collar and a tie, even when she is not on horseback. And Dorothy said it was the look that Miss Chapman gave her at luncheon that really gave her the idea about the Iceman. So Dorothy says she thinks Miss Chapman has got 3/3 of the brains of that trio of Jeegans, because Jeegans is the slang word that Dorothy has thought up to use on people who are society people, because Dorothy says she thinks any gentleman with Mr. Spofford's brains ought to spend his time putting nickels into an electric piano, but I did not even bother to talk back at such a girl as Dorothy. So now we must get ready to get off the train when the train gets to Munich, so that we can look at all of the Kunst in Munich. May 19th. Well, yesterday Mr. Spofford and I and Dorothy got off the train at Munich to see all the Kunst in Munich. But you only call it Munich when you are on the train, because as soon as you get off of the train, they seem to call it München. So you really would know that München was full of Kunst, because in every case that you would not know it, they have painted the word Kunst in large-size black letters on everything in München, and you cannot even see a boots-black stand in München that is not full of Kunst. So Mr. Spofford said that we really ought to go to the theater in München, because even the theater in München was full of Kunst. So we looked at all of the bills of all of the theaters, with the aid of quite an intellectual hotel clerk, who seemed to be able to read it and tell us what it said, because it really meant nothing to us. So it seems they were playing Kiki in München, so I said, let us go and see Kiki, because we have seen Lenore Ulrich in New York, and we would really know what it was all about even if they do not seem to talk the English language. So then we went to the Kunst Theater. So it seems that München is practically full of Germans, and the lobby of the Kunst Theater was really full of Germans who stand in the lobby and drink beer and eat quite a lot of Bermudian onions and garlic sausage and hard-boiled eggs and beer before all of the acts. So I really had to ask Mr. Spofford if he thought we had come to the right theater, because the lobby seemed to smell such a lot. I mean, when the smell of beer gets to be antique, it gets to smell quite a lot. But Mr. Spofford seemed to think that the lobby of the Kunst Theater did not smell any worse than all of the other places in Munich. So then Dorothy spoke up, and Dorothy said, "You can say what you want about the Germans being full of Kunst, but what they are really full of is delicatessen." So then we went into the Kunst Theater, but the Kunst Theater does not seem to smell so good as the lobby of the Kunst Theater. And the Kunst Theater seems to be decorated with quite a lot of what tripe would look like if it was pasted on the wall and gilded. Only you could not really see the gilding because it was covered with quite a lot of dust. So Dorothy looked around and Dorothy said, "If this is Kunst, the art center of the world is Union Hill, New Jersey." So then they started into playing Kiki, but it seems that it was not the same kind of Kiki that we have in America, because it seemed to be all about a family of large-sized German people who seemed to keep getting in each other's ways. I mean, when a stage is completely full of 2 or 3 German people who are quite large size, they really cannot help it if they seem to get in each other's ways. So then Dorothy got to talking with a young gentleman who seemed to be a German gentleman who sat back of her, who she thought was applauding, but what he was really doing was cracking a hard-boiled egg on the back of her chair. So he talked English with quite an accent that seemed to be quite a German accent, so Dorothy asked him if Kiki had come out on the stage yet. So he said no, but she was really a beautiful German actress who came clear from Berlin, and he said we should really wait until she came out, even if we did not seem to understand it. So finally, she came out. I mean, we knew it was her because Dorothy's gentleman friend nudged Dorothy with the sausage. So we looked at her, and we looked at her, and Dorothy said, "If Schumann Heinke still has a grandmother, we have dug her up in München." So we did not bother to see any more of Kiki, because Dorothy said she would really have to know more about the foundations of that building before she would risk our lives to see Kiki do that famous scene where she faints in the last act. Because Dorothy said if the foundations of that building were as antique as the smell, there was going to be a catastrophe when Kiki hit the floor. So even Mr. Spofford was quite discouraged, but he was really glad because he said he was 100% of an American, and it served the Germans right for starting such a war against all we Americans. May 20th. Well, today Mr. Spofford is going to take me all around to all of the museums in München, which are full of Kunst that I really ought to look at. But Dorothy said she had been punished for all of her sins last night, so now she is going to begin life all over again by going out with her German gentleman friend, who is going to take her to a house called the Half-Brow House, which is the world's largest size of a beer hall. So Dorothy said I could be a highbrow and get full of Kunst, but she is satisfied to be a half-brow and get full of beer. But Dorothy will really never be full of anything else but unrefinement. May 21st. Well, Mr. Spofford and I and Dorothy are on the train again, and we are all going to Vienna. I mean, Mr. Spofford and I spent one whole day going through all of the museums in München, but I am really not even going to think about it, because when something terrible happens to me, I always try to be a Christian Science, and I simply do not even think about it, but I deny that it ever happened, even if my feet do seem to hurt quite a lot. So even Dorothy had quite a hard day in München, because her German gentleman friend, who is called Rudolph, came for her at 11 o'clock to take her to breakfast. But Dorothy told him that she had had her breakfast. But her gentleman friend said that he had had his first breakfast too, but it was time for his second. So he took Dorothy to the Half-Brow House, where everybody eats white sausages and pretzels and beer at 11 o'clock. So after they had their white sausages and beer, he wanted to take her for a ride, but they could only go a few blocks, because by then it was time for luncheon. So they ate quite a lot of luncheon, and then he bought her a large-size box of chocolates that were full of liqueurs, and took her to the matinee. So after the first act, Rudolph got hungry, and they had to go and stand in the lobby and have some sandwiches and beer. But Dorothy did not enjoy the show very much, and so after the second act, Rudolph said they would leave because it was time for tea anyway. So after quite a heavy tea, Rudolph asked her to dinner, and Dorothy was too overcome to say no. So after dinner, they went to a beer garden for beer and pretzels. But finally Dorothy began to come to, and she asked him to take her back to the hotel. So Rudolph said he would, but they had better have a bite to eat first. So today, Dorothy really feels just as discouraged as I seem to feel, only Dorothy is not a Christian Science, and all she can do is suffer. But, in spite of all my Christian Science, I am really beginning to feel quite discouraged about Vienna. I mean, Mr. Eisman is in Vienna, and I do not see how I can spend quite a lot of time with Mr. Eisman, and quite a lot of time with Mr. Spofford, and keep them from meeting one another. Because Mr. Spofford might not seem to understand why Mr. Eisman seems to spend quite a lot of money to get me educated. And Dorothy keeps trying to depress me about Miss Chapman, because she says she thinks that when Miss Chapman sees I and Mr. Spofford together, she thinks that Miss Chapman will cable for the family's favorite lunacy expert. So I have got to be as full of Christian Science as I can, and always hope for the best. May 25th. So far everything has really worked out for the best, because Mr. Eisman is very, very busy all day with the button profession, and he tells me to run around with Dorothy all day. So I and Mr. Spofford run around all day. So then I tell Mr. Spofford that I really do not care to go all of the places that you go to at night, but I will go to bed and get ready for tomorrow instead. So then Dorothy and I go to dinner with Mr. Eisman, and then we go to a show, and we stay up quite late at a cabaret called the Chapeau Rouge, and I am able to keep it all up with the aid of champagne. So if we keep our eye out for Mr. Spofford, and do not all bump into one another when he is out looking at things that we Americans really should not look at, it will all work out for the best. I mean, I have even stopped Mr. Spofford looking at museums, because I tell him that I like nature better. And when you look at nature, you look at it in a horse and buggy in the park, and it is much easier on the feet. So now he is beginning to talk about how he would like me to meet his mother. So everything really seems for the best after all. But I have quite a hard time with Mr. Eisman at night. I mean, at night, Mr. Eisman is in quite a state, because every time he makes an engagement about the button factory, it is time for all the gentlemen in Vienna to go to the coffee house and sit. Or else every time he makes an engagement about the button factory, some Viennese gentleman gets the idea to have a picnic, and they all put on short pants and bare knees, and they all put a feather in their hat, and they all walk to the Tyrol. So it really discourages Mr. Eisman quite a lot. But if anyone ought to get discouraged, I think that I ought to get discouraged, because after all, when a girl has had no sleep for a week, a girl cannot help it if she seems to get discouraged. May 27th. Well, finally I broke down, and Mr. Spofford said that he thought a little girl like I, who was trying to reform the whole world was trying to do too much, especially beginning on a girl like Dorothy. So he said there was a famous doctor in Vienna called Dr. Freud, who could stop all of my worrying because he does not give a girl medicine, but he talks you out of it by psychoanalysis. So yesterday, he took me to Dr. Freud. So Dr. Freud and I had quite a long talk in the English language. So it seems that everybody seems to have a thing called inhibitions, which is when you want to do a thing and you do not do it. So then you dream about it instead. So Dr. Freud asked me what I seem to dream about. So I told him that I never really dream about anything. I use my brain so much in the daytime that at night they do not seem to do anything else but rest. So Dr. Freud was very, very surprised at a girl who did not dream about anything. So then he asked me about all my life. He is very, very sympathetic, and he seems to know how to draw a girl out quite a lot. I told him things that I really would not even put in my diary. So then he seemed very, very intrigued at a girl who always seemed to do everything she wanted to do. So he asked me if I really never wanted to do a thing that I did not do. For instance, did I ever want to do a thing that was really violent, for instance? Did I ever want to shoot someone, for instance? So then I said, I had, but the bullet only went in Mr. Jennings' lung and came right out again. So then Dr. Freud looked at me, and he said he did not really think it was possible. So then he called in his assistants, and he pointed at me and talked to his assistants quite a lot in the Viennese language. So then his assistants looked at me, and it really seemed as if I was quite a famous case. So then Dr. Freud said that all I needed was to cultivate a few inhibitions and get some sleep. May 29th. Things are really getting to be quite a strain, because yesterday Mr. Spofford and Mr. Eisman were both in the lobby of the Bristol Hotel, and I had to pretend not to see both of them. It is quite an easy thing to pretend not to see one gentleman, but it is a quite hard thing to pretend not to see two gentlemen. So something has really got to happen soon, or I will have to admit that things seem to be happening that are not for the best. So this afternoon, Dorothy and I had an engagement to meet Count Salm for tea at 4 o'clock. Only you do not call it tea at Vienna, but you seem to call it Yowzer, and you do not drink tea at Vienna, but you drink coffee instead. It is quite unusual to see all of the gentlemen at Vienna stop work to go to Yowzer about 1 hour after they have all finished their luncheon. But time really does not seem to mean so much to Viennese gentlemen, except time to get to the coffee house, which they all seem to know by instincts, or else they really do not seem to mind if they make a mistake and get there too early. Because Mr. Eisman says that when it is time to attend to the button profession, they really seem to lose all of their interest until Mr. Eisman is getting so nervous he could scream. So we went to Dymel's and met Count Salm. But while we were having Yowzer with Count Salm, we saw Mr. Spofford's mother come in with her companion, Miss Chapman. And Miss Chapman seemed to look at me quite a lot and talk to Mr. Spofford's mother about me quite a lot. So I became quite nervous, because I really wished that we were not with Count Salm. It has been quite a hard thing to make Mr. Spofford think I am trying to reform Dorothy. But if I had to try to make him think that I was trying to reform Count Salm, he might begin to think that there is a limit to almost everything. So Mr. Spofford's mother seems to be deaf, because she seems to use an ear trumpet, and I really could not help overhearing quite a lot of words that Miss Chapman was using on me, even if it is not such good etiquette to overhear people. So Miss Chapman seemed to be telling Mr. Spofford's mother that I was a creature, and she seemed to be telling her that I was the real reason why her son seemed to be so full of nothing but neglect lately. So then Mr. Spofford's mother looked at me and looked at me, even if it was not such good etiquette to look at a person. And Miss Chapman kept right on talking to Mr. Spofford's mother, and I heard her mention Willie Gwynn, and I think that Miss Chapman has been making some inquiries about me, and I really think that she has heard about the time when all of the family of Willie Gwynn had quite a long talk with me and persuaded me not to marry Willie Gwynn for $10,000. So I really wish Mr. Spofford would introduce me to his mother before she gets to be full of quite a lot of prejudice, because one thing seems to be piling up on top of another thing until I am almost on the verge of getting nervous, and I have not had any time yet to do what Dr. Freud said a girl ought to do. So tonight I am going to tell Mr. Eisman that I have got to go to bed early, so then I can take quite a long ride with Mr. Spofford and look at nature, and he may say something definite, because nothing makes gentlemen get so definite as looking at nature when it is moonlight. May 30th. Well, last night Mr. Spofford and I took quite a long ride in the park, but they do not call it a park in the Viennese language, but they call it a prater. So a prater is really divine, because it is just like Coney Island, but at the same time it is in the woods, and it is practically full of trees, and it has quite a long road for people to take rides on in a horse and buggy. So I found out that Miss Chapman had been talking against me quite a lot, so it seems that she has been making inquiries about me, and I was really surprised to hear all of the things that Miss Chapman seemed to find out about me, except that she did not find out about Mr. Eisman educating me. So then I had to tell Mr. Spofford that I was not always so reformed as I am now, because the world was full of gentlemen who were nothing but wolves in sheep clothes, that did nothing but take advantage of all we girls. So I really cried a lot. So then I told him how I was just a little girl from Little Rock when I first left Little Rock, and by that time, even Mr. Spofford had tears in his eyes. So I told him how I came from a very, very good family, because Papa was very intellectual, and he was a very, very prominent elk, and everybody always said that he was a very intellectual elk. So I told Mr. Spofford that when I left Little Rock, I thought all of the gentlemen did not want to do anything but protect we girls, and by the time I found out that they did not want to protect us so much, it was too late. So then he cried quite a lot. So then I told him how I finally got reformed by reading all about him in the newspapers, and when I saw him in the Oriental Express, it really seemed to be nothing but the result of fate. So I told Mr. Spofford that I thought a girl was really more reformed if she knew what it was to be unreformed than if she was born reformed and never really knew that was the matter with her. So then Mr. Spofford reached over and he kissed me on the forehead in a way that was full of reverence, and he said I seemed to remind him quite a lot of a girl who got quite a write-up in the Bible who was called Magdalene. So then he said that he used to be a member of the choir himself, so who was he to cast the first rock at a girl like I? So we rode around in the prater until it was quite late, and it really was divine, because it was moonlight, and we talked quite a lot about morals, and all the bands in the prater were all playing in the distance Mama Love Papa, because Mama Love Papa has just reached Vienna, and they all seem to be crazy about Mama Love Papa, even if it is not so new in America. So then he took me home to the hotel. So everything always works out for the best, because this morning Mr. Spofford called up and told me he wanted me to meet his mother. So I told him I would like to have luncheon alone with his mother, because we could have quite a little tete-a-tete if there was only two of us. So I told him to bring his mother to our room for luncheon, because I thought that Miss Chapman could not walk into our room and spoil everything. So he brought his mother down to our sitting room, and I put on quite a simple little organdy gown that I had ripped all of the trimming off of, and I had a pair of black lace mitts that Dorothy used to wear in the Follies, and I had a pair of shoes that did not have any heels on them. So when he introduced us to each other, I dropped her a curtsy, because I always think it is quite quaint when a girl drops quite a lot of curtsies. So then he left us alone, and we had quite a little talk, and I told her that I did not seem to like all of the flappers that we seem to have nowadays, because I was brought up to be more old-fashioned. So then Mr. Spofford's mother told me that Miss Chapman said that she had heard that I was not so old-fashioned. But I told her that I was so old-fashioned, that I was always full of respect for all of my elders, and I would not dare to tell them everything they ought to do, like Miss Chapman seems to tell her everything she ought to do, for instance. So then I ordered luncheon, and I thought some champagne would make her feel quite good for luncheon, so I asked her if she liked champagne. So she really likes champagne very, very much, but Miss Chapman thinks it is not so nice for a person to drink liquor. But I told her that I was a Christian Science, and all of we Christian Science seem to believe that there cannot really be any harm in anything, so how can there be any harm in a small-size bottle of champagne? So she never seemed to look at it in that kind of a light before, because she said that Miss Chapman believed in Christian Science also, but what Miss Chapman believed about things that were good for you to drink seemed to apply more towards water. So then we had luncheon, and she began to feel very, very good. So I thought that we had better have another bottle of champagne, because I told her that I was such an ardent Christian Science that I did not believe there could be any harm in 2 bottles of champagne. So we had another bottle of champagne, and she became very intrigued about Christian Science, because she said that she really thought it was a better religion than Presbyterians. So she said Miss Chapman used to try to get her to use it on things, but Miss Chapman never seemed to have such a large-size grasp of the Christian Science religion as I seemed to have. So then I told her that I thought Miss Chapman was jealous of her good looks. So then she said that that was true, because Miss Chapman would always make her wear hats that were made out of black horse's hair, because horse's hair does not weigh so much on a person's brain. So I told her I was going to give her one of my hats that has got quite large-size roses on it. So then I got it out, but we could not get it on her head, because hats are quite small on account of hair being bobbed. So I thought I would get the scissors and bob her head, but then I thought I had done enough to her for one day. So Henry's mother said I was really the most sunshine that she had ever had in all her life, and when Henry came back to take his mother up to her room, she did not want to go. But after he got her away, he called me up on the telephone, and he was quite excited. And he said he wanted to ask me something that was very, very important. So I said I would see him tonight. But now I have got to see Mr. Eisman, because I have an idea about doing something that is really, really important that has got to be done at once. May 31st. Well, I and Dorothy and Mr. Eisman are on a train going to a place called Budapest. So I did not see Henry again before I left, but I left him a letter, because I thought it would be a quite good thing if what he wanted to ask me he would have to write down, instead of asking me, and he could not write it to me if I was in the same city that he is in. So I told him in my letter that I had to leave in 5 minutes' time, because I found out that Dorothy was just on the verge of getting very unreformed, and if I did not get her away, all I had done for her would really go for nothing. So I told him to write down what he had to say to me and mail it to me at the Ritz Hotel in Budapest, because I always seem to believe in the old adage, say it in writing. So it was really very easy to get Mr. Eisman to leave Vienna, because yesterday he went out to see the button factory, but it seems that all of the people at the button factory were not at work, but they were giving a birthday party to some saint. So it seems that every time some saint has a birthday, they all stop work so they can give it a birthday party. So Mr. Eisman looked at their calendar and found out that some saint or other was born practically every week in the year. So he has decided that America is good enough for him. So Henry will not be able to follow me to Budapest because his mother is having treatments by Dr. Freud, and she seems to be a much more difficult case than I seem to be. I mean, it is quite hard for Dr. Freud because she cannot seem to remember which is a dream and which really happened to her. So she tells him everything, and he has to use his judgment. I mean, when she tells him that a very, very handsome young gentleman tried to flirt with her on Fifth Avenue, he uses his judgment. So we will soon be at a Ritz hotel again, and I must say it will be delightful to find a Ritz hotel right in the central of Europe. June 1st. Well, yesterday Henry's letter came, and it says in black and white that he and his mother have never met such a girl as I, and he wants me to marry him. So I took Henry's letter to the photographers, and I had quite a lot of photographs taken of it, because a girl might lose Henry's letter, and she would not have anything left to remember him by. But Dorothy says to hang on to Henry's letter, because she really does not think the photographs do it justice. So this afternoon I got a telegram from Henry, and the telegram says that Henry's father is very, very ill in New York, and they have got to leave for New York immediately, and his heart is broken not to see me again, and to send him my answer by telegraph, so that his mind will be rested while he is going back to New York. So I sent him a telegram, and I accepted his proposal. So tonight I got another telegram, and Henry says that he and his mother are very, very happy, and Henry's mother can hardly bear Miss Chapman anymore, and Henry says he hopes I will decide to come right back to New York and keep his mother quite a lot of company, because he thinks I can reform Dorothy more in New York anyway, where there is prohibition and nobody can get anything to drink. So now I have got to make up my mind whether I really want to marry Henry after all, because I know too much to get married to any gentleman like Henry without thinking it all over. Because Henry is the kind of a gentleman who gets on a girl's nerves quite a lot, and when a gentleman has nothing else to do but get on a girl's nerves, there really seems to be a limit to almost everything. Because when a gentleman has a business, he has an office, and he has to be there. But when a gentleman's business is only looking into other people's business, a gentleman is always on the verge of coming in and out of the house. And a girl could not really say that her own time was her own. And when Henry was not in and out of the house, his mother would always be in and out of the house, because she seems to think that I am so full of nothing but sunshine. So it is quite a problem, and I seem to be quite in a quandary, because it might really be better if Henry should happen to decide that he should not get married, and he should change his mind and desert a girl, and then it would only be right if a girl should sue him for a breach of promise. But I really think whatever happens, that Dorothy and I had better get back to New York. So I will see if Mr. Eisman will send us back. I mean, I really do not think that Mr. Eisman will mind us going back, because if he does, I will start shopping again, and that always seems to bring him to terms. But all the time I am going back to New York, I will have to try to make up my mind one way or another, because we girls really cannot help it if we have ideals, and sometimes my mind seems to get to running on things that are romantic, and I seem to think that maybe there is some place in the world where there is a gentleman who knows how to look and act like Count Salm, and who has got money besides. And when a girl's mind gets to thinking about such a romantic thing, a girl's mind really does not seem to know whether to marry Henry or not. Chapter 6. Brains are really everything. June 14th. Well, Dorothy and I arrived at New York yesterday, because Mr. Eisman finally decided to send us home, because he said that all of his button profession would not stand the strain of educating me much more in Europe. So we separated from Mr. Eisman in Budapest, because Mr. Eisman had to go to Berlin to look up all of his starving relatives in Berlin, who have done nothing but starve since the war. So he wrote me just before we sailed, and he said that he had dug up all his starving relatives, and he had looked them all over and decided not to bring them to America, because there was not one of his starving relatives who could travel on a railroad ticket without paying excess fare for overweight. So Dorothy and I took the boat, and all the way over on the boat, I had to make up my mind whether I really wanted to marry the famous Henry H. Spofford or not, because he was waiting for me to arrive at New York, and he was so impatient that he could hardly wait for me to arrive at New York. But I have not wasted all of my time on Henry, even if I do not marry him, because I have some letters from Henry which would come in very, very handy if I did not marry Henry. So Dorothy seems to agree with me quite a lot, because Dorothy says the only thing she could stand being to Henry would be to be his widow at the age of 18. So coming over on the boat, I decided not to bother to meet any gentlemen, because what good does it do to meet gentlemen when there is nothing to do on a boat but go shopping at a little shop where they do not have anything that costs more than $5? And besides, if I did meet any gentleman on the boat, he would want to see me off the boat, and then we would bump into Henry. But then I heard that there was a gentleman on the boat who was quite a dealer in unset diamonds from a town called Amsterdam. So I met the gentleman, and we went around together quite a lot. But we had quite a quarrel the night before we landed, so I did not even bother to look at him when I came down the gangplank, and I put the unset diamonds in my handbag so I did not have to declare them at customs. So Henry was waiting for me at the customs, because he had come up from Pennsylvania to meet me, because their country estate is at Pennsylvania, and Henry's father is very, very ill at Pennsylvania, so Henry has to stay there practically all of the time. So all of the reporters were at the customs, and they all heard about how Henry and I were engaged to one another, and they wanted to know what I was before I became engaged to Henry. So I told them that I was nothing but a society girl from Little Rock, Arkansas. So then I became quite angry with Dorothy, because one of the reporters asked Dorothy when I made my debut in society at Little Rock, and Dorothy said I made my debut at the Elks Annual Street Fair and Carnival at the age of 15. I mean, Dorothy never overlooks any chance to be unrefined, even when she is talking to literary gentlemen like reporters. So Henry brought me to the apartment in his Rolls-Royce, and while we were coming to the apartment, he said he wanted to give me my engagement ring, and I really became all thrills. So he said that he had gone to Cartier's, and he had looked over all the engagement rings in Cartier's, and after he had looked them all over, he had decided that they were not half good enough for me. So then he took a box out of his pocket, and I really became intrigued. So then Henry said that when he looked at all of those large-sized diamonds, he really felt that they did not have any sentiment, so he was going to give me his class ring from Amherst College instead. So then I looked at him and looked at him, but I am too full of self-control to say anything at this stage of the game. So I said it was really very sweet of him to be so full of nothing but sentiment. So then Henry said that he would have to go back to Pennsylvania to talk to his father about us getting married, because his father has really got his heart set on us not getting married. So I told Henry that perhaps if I would meet his father, I would win him over, because I always seem to win gentlemen over. But Henry says that that is just the trouble, because some girl is always winning his father over, and they hardly dare to let him go out of their sight, and they hardly dare to let him go to church alone, because the last time he went to church alone, some girl won him over on the street corner, and he arrived back home with all of his pocket money gone, and they could not believe him when he said that he had put it in the plate, because he has not put more than a dime in the plate for the last 50 years. So it seems that the real reason why his father does not want Henry to marry me is because his father says that Henry always has all of the fun, and every time Henry's father wants to have some fun of his own, Henry always stops him, and Henry will not even let him be sick at a hospital where he could have some fun of his own. But he keeps him at home where he has to have a nurse Henry picked out for him, who is a male nurse. So all of his objections seem to be nothing but the spirit of reciprocity. But Henry says that all his objections cannot last much longer, because he is nearly 90 years of age after all, and nature must take its course sooner or later. So Dorothy says what a fool I am to waste my time on Henry, when I might manage to meet Henry's father, and the whole thing would be over in a few months, and I would practically own the state of Pennsylvania. But I do not think I ought to take Dorothy's advice, because Henry's father is watched like a hawk, and Henry himself is his power of attorney, so no good could really come of it after all. And after all, why should I listen to the advice of a girl like Dorothy, who traveled all over Europe, and all she came home with was a bangle? So Henry spent the evening at the apartment, and then he had to go back to Pennsylvania to be there Thursday morning, because every Thursday morning he belongs to a society who does nothing but censure all of the photo plays. So they cut out all of the pieces of all the photo plays that show things that are too risque, that people ought not to look at. So then they put all of the risque pieces together, and they run them over and over again. So it would really be quite a hard thing to drag Henry away from one of his Thursday mornings, and he can hardly wait from one Thursday morning to another, because he really does not seem to enjoy anything so much as censoring photo plays. And after a photo play has once been censured, he seems to lose all of his interest in it. So after Henry left, I held quite a conversation with Lulu, who is my maid and who looked out for my apartment while I was away. So Lulu really thinks I ought to marry Mr. Spofford after all, because Lulu says that she kept studying Mr. Spofford all of the time she was unpacking my trunks, and Lulu says she is sure that any time I feel as if I had to get away from Mr. Spofford, I could just set him down on the floor and give him a packet of risque French postcards to censure and stay away as long as I like. So Henry is going to arrange for me to come down to Pennsylvania for a weekend and meet all of his family. But if all of Henry's family are as full of reforms as Henry seems to be, it will be quite an ordeal, even for a girl like I. June 15th. Yesterday morning was quite an ordeal for a refined girl, because all of the newspapers all printed the story of how Henry and I are engaged to one another, but they all seemed to leave out the part about me being a society girl, except one newspaper, and that was the newspaper that quoted what Dorothy said about me being a debutante at the Elks Carnival. So I called up Dorothy at the Ritz, and I told Dorothy that a girl like she ought to keep her mouth closed in the presence of reporters. So it seems that quite a lot of reporters kept calling Dorothy up, but Dorothy said she did not say anything to any of them, except one reporter asked her what I used for money, and she told him buttons. But Dorothy really should not have said such a thing, because quite a few people seem to know that Mr. Eisman is educating me, and that he is known all over Chicago as Gus Eisman, the Button King, so one thing might suggest another until people's minds might begin to think something. But Dorothy said that she did not say anything more about me being a debutante at Little Rock, because after all, Dorothy knows that I really did not make any debut in Little Rock, because just when it was time to make my debut, my gentleman friend, Mr. Jennings, became shot, and after the trial was over and all of the jury had let me off, I was really much too fatigued to make any debut. So then Dorothy said, "Why don't we throw you a party now, and you can become a debutante now and put them all in their place, because it seems that Dorothy is dying for a party." So that is really the first sensible suggestion that Dorothy has made yet, because I think that every girl who is engaged to a gentleman who has a fine old family like Henry had really ought to be a debutante. So I told her to come right over, and we would plan my debut, but we would keep it very, very quiet and give it tomorrow night, because if Henry heard I was making my debut, he would come up from Pennsylvania, and he would practically spoil the party, because all Henry has to do to spoil a party is to arrive at it. So Dorothy came over, and we planned my debut. So first we decided to have some engraved invitations engraved, but it always takes quite a little time to have invitations engraved, and it would really be foolish, because all of the gentlemen we were going to invite to my debut were all members of the Racket Club, so I could just write out a notice that I was having a debut and give it to Willie Gwynn and have Willie Gwynn post it on the Racket Club board. So Willie Gwynn posted it on the club board, and then he called me up and he told me that he had never seen so much enthusiasm since the Dempsey-Furbo fight. And he said that the whole Racket Club would be there in a body. So then we had to plan what girls we would ask to my debut, because I have not seemed to meet so many society women yet, because of course a girl does not meet society women until her debut is all over, and then all the society women all come and call on a debutante. But I know practically all of the society men, because practically all of the society men belong to the Racket Club. So after I have the Racket Club at my debut, all I have to do to take my real place in society is to meet their mothers and sisters, because I know practically all of their sweethearts now. But I always seem to think that it is delightful to have quite a lot of girls at a party, if a girl has quite a lot of gentlemen at a party, and it is quite delightful to have all of the girls from the Follies. But I really could not invite them, because after all, they are not in my set. So then I thought it all over, and I thought that even if it was not etiquette to invite them to a party, it really would be etiquette to hire them to come to a party and be entertainers. And after they were entertainers, they could mix into the party, and it really would not be a social error. So then the telephone rang, and Dorothy answered it, and it seems that it was Joe Sanguinetti, who is almost the official bootlegger for the whole Racket Club. And Joe said he had heard about my debut, and if he could come to my debut and bring his club, which is the Silver Spray Social Club of Brooklyn, he would supply all of the liquor, and he would guarantee to practically run the rum fleet up to the front door. So Dorothy told him he could come, and she hung up the telephone before she told me his proposition, and I became quite angry with Dorothy, because after all, the Silver Spray Social Club is not even mentioned in the social register, and it has no place at a girl's debut. But Dorothy said by the time the party got into swing, anyone would have to be a genius if he could tell whether he belonged to the Racket Club, the Silver Spray Social Club, or the Knights of Pythias. But I really was almost sorry that I asked Dorothy to help plan my debut, except that Dorothy is very good to have at a party if the police come in, because Dorothy always knows how to manage the police, and I never knew a policeman yet who did not finish up by being madly in love with Dorothy. So then Dorothy called up all of the reporters on all of the newspapers and invited them all to my debut so they could see it with their own eyes. So Dorothy says that she is going to see to it that my debut lands on the front page of all the newspapers if we have to commit a murder to do it. June 19th. Well, it has been 3 days since my debut party started, but I finally got tired and left the party last night and went to bed because I always seem to lose all of my